Hey, welcome
Hey,
to Guns and Ammo's The Buzz Podcast. We're going to kick this one off with Keith Wood. Not everything we do is going to be about gun reviews, product reviews, that sort of thing. We want to get to know the people behind the names in Guns and Ammo magazine. And we're going to start this off with Keith Wood. Now, we've been friends for more than 20 years at this point, I'm thinking.
yeah, right
And
about.
but there's still some things I don't know about you. So hopefully we can sort some of that out. Now, if you don't know Keith Wood, he's the author of Spent Cases, our back page of Guns and Ammo, and it's actually one of the first places I know a lot of readers turn to when they open an issue of Guns and Ammo. If you only have, you know, 1 minute at a mailbox to read or preview Guns and Ammo, a lot of people just go right to that, and it kind of sets the tone for how the rest of the issue is going to be received.
Yeah, it's
So
short
you've
enough
been
you can read, walk up from the mailbox to the front door.
That's right. You've been doing it since November 2018, which is something I had to remind you about because it's
Yeah, I had
been
no
going
idea the
on for.
dates when we. Yeah, it's in some ways it seems like it's been longer than that. In some ways it feels like it just started. So
Yeah. So, what is it like to prepare to write a Spent Cases? Now, I can tell you, you seem to turn them around pretty fast, but where do you get inspiration and, uh, how do you complement it in terms of working with us with the art?
yeah, so it usually happens pretty quickly. Oftentimes it starts with a conversation between us of what do you want to do this month, and sometimes I have a really strong idea, and sometimes I have no clue whatsoever. Um, we kind of make it sort of current events, but that's somewhat difficult because there's a lag in between when it's written and when it comes out, right, of several weeks.
Right.
So it really just varies. I mean, sometimes something will hit me and I'll say, okay, this is my back page, no question about it. And other times you'll feed me an idea that you have. Sometimes it's a gun that I've bought recently or something like that. So it really varies.
Yeah.
But because of the format of it is so much different from anything else I do, it doesn't get old. It doesn't get mundane. So that's why I think it happens really quickly. It's not because it's a short piece, because oftentimes, as you know, as a writer, it's harder to write a short piece than it is a long one. But
Right.
it's because it's kind of fresh and always new and always kind of a little bit of a different topic that it comes to me really quickly, usually.
So let's talk a little bit about the back page of Guns and Ammo real quick. Uh, I recall the first back pages I started reading with Guns and Ammo going back to the 1980s were Parting Shots with Dick Wolff. And then at some point, Jeff Cooper was the second to the last page behind Parting Shots with Dick Wolff. Eventually, Jeff Cooper stepped up and made Cooper's Corner the back page. And it was that way until, say, probably 2006, I think, is when he passed away, early in 2006. Uh, but what do you recall with reading back pages of Guns and Ammo? I know you've been a reader for years.
Yeah, so you and I probably came to know Guns N' Ammo around the same time, that late '80s time frame, and I do remember those Dick Wolf columns. Um, some of them were really almost literary, really different from what we have now.
Right.
And then of course Cooper's Corner is what people think of, or at least what probably you and I think of as being the back page for so long. And I always loved that format. It was just this pithy little, sometimes the whole back page would be one topic. Often it was just paragraphs or a sentence, and he would have
Right.
like dispatches from friends in some African bush war or something like that. It was just so
Yeah.
interesting. It
It'd
was
be
about
like
as interesting as the man.
Rhodesia reports.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, well, I don't
Exactly.
even, I'm 12 years old. I don't even know where Rhodesia is on a map. But it was always interesting. And
Yeah.
then, it obviously Colonel Cooper passed away, and then our friend Guthrie had the column for a while. And a little bit of
Yeah.
an eerie thing there, and you'll recall this, but his very last one, he said, "I might die tomorrow, but if I do, I'll die with." I think it was a model. It was the Smith 41 mag with fixed sights. I
Smith.
can't model 58 maybe, and he died
Yeah.
that after that column, which was eerie. But great friend of ours. So when you asked me to do it, of course, I was honored as a longtime reader of the magazine, as a friend of Guthrie's, as somebody who looked up to Jeff Cooper. It was a little bit surreal.
That's right.
So
Well, and let's talk about Guthrie for a second, because a lot of readers at this point if they've come to Guns and Ammo in the last 10 years, they don't know who he is.
Right.
But Guthrie, he was working for Quality Whitetails Deer Management, I believe, out of Georgia at the time. I came to the NRA working first out of the competitive shooting division at the headquarters in Fairfax, Virginia. And then I started going into NRA publications. And Jay Guthrie was hired after me. And we actually kind of roomed a little bit together in an apartment until we finally got our own apartments. And he was a wild man for sure, but always the life of any crowd. And I was living vicariously through his experiences because he was first working with Shooting Illustrated magazine over there as an executive editor to Dave Campbell. That magazine was brand new at the time. And he was getting to travel the world, I remember his first trip to Africa with CVA shooting muzzle loaders, and I was always
with Chad
of some of that. Yes, with Chad Shear.
Yeah.
But what a great group of friends. I believe I met you through him.
Yeah, and so I started at NRA as a new lobbyist in 2003. It was like October, November. It was Halloween week, 2003. And this is my dream job, right? I move up to Fairfax, Virginia, and I'm from the South. People are a little friendlier. Mid-Atlantic, NRA, as you know, internal politics were a little bit strange. I'm the new guy, and people were not immediately welcoming. I left there with great friends and formed some lifelong friendships there. But at first, I was like, what am I doing here? Nobody's really being friendly or anything like that. And it's like day 3 or 4, and I lived right across the street, as you may remember, and I would walk back and forth to work. And I walked into work from lunch one day, and I'm like, geez, this is kind of not what I envisioned. And this guy gets in the elevator with me, sticks out his hand. He says, "Hey, I'm Guthrie. I'm new here. What's your name?" And we had started the same week. And he was really the first person who was nice to me there. And, Milledgeville, Georgia, good old boy, and brought that, Southern charm to NRA. And almost, left his footprints in place. Nobody left Guthrie worse off than when they met him. So This was a great guy and brought people together. And like you said, was a wild man and had a great time. And everybody around him had a great time. And Chad Shear and I had become friends and spent a lot of time together and kind of bonded through Guthrie. That's how it never, didn't meet Chad until after Guthrie was gone, but our common bond was our friendship with Guthrie.
Well, I think Guthrie connected a lot of us in this community. It's actually rather fascinating now when you look back on it. We're all still friends. We have a friend named Mike Humphreys working at Springfield Armory. He was at NRA working for American Rifleman at the time. Like that crew of friends that came out of NRA, a lot of us held that bond from Guthrie, because Guthrie then came over to Intermedia working for Guns and Ammo magazine. And, we all stayed connected. It was a kind of community. And at his funeral, I missed his funeral because I was in Africa on my first trip in 2013 over there and I was told, "Hey, do you want to go home? Do you want to go to his funeral?" And I said, honestly, I think Guthrie would rather me finish my first safari than to come home
100%.
Be sad over his body.
Yeah. And I showed up at his funeral. It was in Georgia, so it was a drivable trip for me, and saw people, of course, that I hadn't seen in a while, and ran into folks. There was a guy there that I worked at a Bass Pro Shops my first summer of law school in Orlando, Florida. And this guy and I worked together behind the gun counter. Hadn't seen him in years. Somehow he was friends with Guthrie because Guthrie was friends with everybody. And I reunited. It was just like Guthrie was special, as Jeff Johnston put it. He was he was the social chair. So he tied everybody together in a way.
You mentioned Jeff Johnston. He was another one of that crew. He was working at American Hunter when I was in publications at that time. And he's gone on to be an amazing writer, but also just what a charismatic individual.
One of the most fun people you'll ever be around. So,
well, hey, getting on back to you now and into Guns and Ammo, of course. When he passed, we had another backpage writer, and but then there was a change. When I came on to become the editor-in-chief of Guns and Ammo magazine, I was reluctant to install just anybody as the backpage writer, and it actually took me probably two and a half years before I finally got you involved in writing this back page. For I guess until 2018. I see it would have been 2014, 2018. So it's more like 4 years. The back page of Guns and Ammo is simply a picture which we dug out of archives, and then we researched everything we could about that picture and wrote a half-page description about it. You came on, and it was time to reintroduce personality to that back page, and that's exactly what it was missing. One of your first columns was actually what you became kind of known for at gunsandammo.com, and that was your Best States series. And
Right.
that you actually carry. A lot of people think that you wrote the first Best States, but we actually had a couple of different writers of it. Brad Fitzpatrick being one of them. We had a couple different writers for gunsandammo.com, and it went viral. And then, we're like, look, let Keith Wood, get involved in it. And I believe your first one. What year was that? Your Best States for gun owners.
2015, sound right? Yeah, I think 2015.
Yeah.
And that
so
fits in
10 years ago.
Yeah, and that fits in really well, and we can get into my career and all that. But the bottom line is, I've been the last 20-some years have lobbied state legislatures. So keeping track with state politics and state laws is what I've done for a living. And then of course have this passion for firearms and gun rights. So putting the two together was kind of perfect. And it's a bear to write. There's a lot that goes into that. And every year I get something wrong, and our readers always let us know, and that's great because I make those corrections going forward. But it's worth it, and it's one that I've seen picked up by more traditional media outlets, and then of course we've seen it.
We've had like USA Today.
Yeah. Then we've seen ripoffs on YouTube using our map. That's
right.
That's kind of taken on a life of its own. So.
Yeah, and we've also then come out. Some years it's almost a repetition of the previous years. So we've also developed ones like Best States for Concealed Carry. We've had a Best States for Suppressors. There may not be enough changes in a given year to justify writing a completely new feature and publishing it in an annual issue of Guns and Ammo. But it's been fun to see where this column has evolved.
Yeah, if you look at it over the arc of the years, you're like 2023 to 2024, maybe not a huge difference. But 2015 to 2025, tremendous difference, right? When we started out, there were a couple states that had permitless carry, and now it's basically half the country. There have been significant changes over the years, both in the positive side and then, in terms of gun control laws in other states. So,
right, absolutely. So let's get back into that a little bit. You mentioned it a little, your career. How do you come to work at the NRA? Tell us a little bit about where you got the law background and what that's done for you.
So grew up my entire childhood from probably preschool, wanted to be in the Army. That's all I ever wanted to be. Set my entire career on that path. Kind of took the SAT as an afterthought because they don't require they require the ASVAB, not the SAT, right? And they brought in JROTC my junior year in high school. And I joined it, of course, because I think it got you like E2 or E3 when you enlisted. And I really hit it off with the instructors. One was he was an Air Force retired master sergeant, a guy named Walt Schambach, who's passed. And he's one of those people that touched my life in a very meaningful way and kind of changed the trajectory of my life and really encouraged me to go to college. And I was not, my dad went to ninth grade. My mom went to 1 year of college. There was no college fund. That wasn't something that was ever like on the horizon for me. And he convinced me that if you want to go, there's a way to get there. Ended up getting an ROTC scholarship, going all through college on an ROTC scholarship and doing, field exercises on the weekends and PT in the mornings and all that kind of stuff. And then I go away to Fort Lewis to advanced camp before you get commissioned. And they said I had irregular heartbeat. So this is 1998. The military's downsizing. I'm sure 2003, they would have thought I was just fine. But that ended that dream. And so I kind of went to law school as an afterthought. That's something I had thought about doing down the road, maybe after a military career. So I just kind of moved that up, ended up at Florida State University, which exposed me to the legislative process. I was in the state capitol and worked in a law firm and saw the lawyering was kind of miserable and wasn't really what I wanted to do. But there was this guy that would come and go in the office with a smile on his face, and half the time didn't have a tie on. And I said, "Who's that?" "He's our lobbyist." I was like, "Oh, that's what I want to be." But got a job back in South Florida where I grew up as a prosecutor. So did that for a while, and then sort of actually went to SHOT Show in 2003, got a pass from somebody I knew who was a gun dealer, went to SHOT and sort of talked my way into a job. So NRA show was in the same venue. This was back when SHOT was in Orlando. NRA show was in Orlando about a month later. I had a meeting with Chris Cox. It was Charlton Heston's last public appearance.
Right.
And crazy turn of events was on a trip from Africa. I flew up to Fairfax, interviewed with NRA, was sort of waiting to hear something, went on this African trip on a hunt with a friend. I'm in the Johannesburg airport, and next to me at the ticket counter is Chris Cox, head of ILA, and Jim Baker, longtime, former head of ILA, two legends in the lobbying community.
Right.
Run into them on the other side of the world, and they're on my flight. And that was a Friday. On Monday, I had a job offer at NRA. So crazy sort of turn of events.
That is amazing. What a story career.
Definitely meant to be.
You mentioned one of your influences, Walt, but who else influenced you in this path, and who influences you now as the Backpage writer?
Yeah, well, a lot of kids, my dad had a huge influence on me. I was born in Miami. My parents were born in Miami. We were kind of an endangered species of people that are actually native to South Florida. And my dad had some guns, mainly some older, World War II era stuff. But there wasn't really an opportunity to shoot. You could go shoot somewhere illegally or whatever. And I guess we could have gone to a range, but we never did. My dad worked a lot, but he had those guns. I would always ask to see him. He always let me look at him because he knew if he didn't, I would find a way to look at him when he wasn't around. So under his supervision, I would sit there, I would take him apart. I had a book called Small Arms of the World. My dad had this book. It's on the shelf now, back here somewhere now. And it had like disassembly and assembly of all. So I would sit there and take, M1 carbine or whatever and field strip it, look at everything. And I did this for 10 years before I ever actually got to shoot one. So that built that passion. And of course, wanting to have a military career was part of that. But from an influence standpoint, I was about 4 years old, and there was rioting in Miami, pretty widespread riots. And my dad had a heavy equipment business and had to deliver vehicles, equipment all over the city of Miami. That was his job. He couldn't avoid it. So he had to drive through some of these areas where there was rioting going on. So I'm in his work truck, and this is like 80, 81, and he had a 2.5-inch barrel Smith Model 10 on the vinyl seat next to him. And it kind of hit me that's so he can come home at night. And at the time, until 1987, there was no legal way to carry a gun in Florida. In some of the northern Florida states, counties, you might be able to get, permission or something like that. But it was virtually impossible for a regular person to get a carry permit in Florida at that point. So my dad was having to defy the law to keep himself safe, to go home at night and feed his family. And that hit me at a very young age. Like, this isn't right. He's a law-abiding guy. Why can't he have a gun to protect himself? And that's something I've tried to never forget, that, we should, as legislatures are making laws, like, who are we trying to protect here? Are we trying to protect the criminal or the man or woman that's just trying to go through their life? I'm not trying to be a vigilante or anything like that, but to just earn a living. So that was huge.
Interesting. I can see that sort of inspiration in your writing.
Yeah, and I try to really.
Now, sorry, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you.
No, I just try to always keep that in perspective. One of the my dad always said, "Don't forget where you came from," and that's one of those things I never forget, because that's where I came from.
Now, a lot of people won't know. You've mentioned it in one of your Backpage columns. We've seen the rifle before, but you have a rifle behind you it's dressed with red, white, and blue. It's got stars and stripes on it. And if you're a longtime reader of Guns and Ammo, it's known as the Miss America rifle. Tell us a little bit about it and what it means to you. Yeah,
so about the time that I started reading Guns and Ammo, very early, this would have been like, I think it was September 91 issue. Ross Seyfried, who was always my favorite Guns and Ammo writer, he was shooting editor for many years, IPSC world champion, African professional hunter, you name it, just a neat guy, an incredible writer. He's one of the folks that kind of inspired me to write. And I always I had this dream as a kid that one day he and I would be friends. And, he was sort of mentored personally by Elmer Keith. And I'm like, well, Elmer Keith mentored Ross Seyfried. Ross is going to mentor me. This is how this is going to happen. Well, somehow he and I actually became friends. And this is before I was writing for Guns and Ammo. Jeff Johnston, believe it or not, introduced us at an NRA show at some kind of reception. And he and I had a lot of interests in common. And I would go visit him and things like that. And one day I asked him, and the concept of Miss America was, long range shooting now has become a whole world in its own. But there wasn't, in 1991, it was in its infancy. We didn't have laser rangefinders and ballistic computers and things like that, in the common shooting world. So he built this rifle to shoot a mile. And it's a 416 Rigby, neck down to 30 caliber with an improved shoulder, Wildcat cartridge, tremendously powerful. And Melvin Forbes, the late Melvin Forbes, built the rifle for him. Ross and Forbes' wife devised this paint job of an American flag, right. And Ross called it Miss America. It had a different scope on it back then. And when Ross and I, in our friendship, I asked him one time, I said, bullets have changed so much. Slower powders, which is one of his challenges back then, was finding a powder slow enough. I said, all these things have changed so much. Have you ever thought about updating that rifle? And he said, no. He said, I've thought about it, but I know a young man in Alabama who's still mad at it. And so he sent me home with the rifle and the dies and the powder and everything. I ended up buying it later when he said, are you going to send it back or do you want to buy it? And I bought it. So it's one of those neat things as someone who grew up reading the magazine and is a huge fan of the magazine and some of the writers that now I write for it, and I'm friends with some of the folks and own some of the guns that I read about as a kid. So that's really that's the neatest part of this.
Are you going to use it to shoot a mile?
I mean, a mile is no big deal now. I kind of think I got to do like 2 or 3 miles. But I got to find a place to do that. Maybe FTW or somewhere like that. I've talked to the Hornady folks. They've got their radar system and all that. So there's got to be a way to do it. I want to do it right though, because now a mile is not the big deal it was in 1991.
All right. So let's get into a little bit else about your writing, if you will. I'm going to shift gears. People may know you for writing books. You've actually helped other authors produce some bestseller books out there, but you've been working on one too with a guy named Eddie Penny. Can you tell us a little bit about your most recent project?
Yeah, so I was involved in the first 3 in a series of novels that did exceptionally well, and a little more on the anonymous side. But in the wake of that, was friends with a guy named Eddie Penny, who was he was first a Marine, then a SEAL, then was in development group, which is better known as SEAL Team 6, and had a really interesting military career. But sort of more interestingly was his life, where he became essentially a single father overnight at the height of his military career, and had to adapt from, killing terrorists to raising these children, which he basically had no part of in their lives because he was deployed so often. So he asked me to write a book with him. We did it. It came out, I believe, summer of 22, and has done well. He was on the Sean Ryan show, and a lot of, Eddie's got a pretty big following. He's just a great human being, and to have watched him evolve as a human since I met him has been great. He's just really, you hear so much about all these horror stories about veterans in the transition and operator syndrome, and he's somebody who I've watched kind of go through that and get on the other side of it in a really healthy way. And the book tells that story. It's not just a shoot 'em up military book. It's really a book about life and redemption and mental health and everything else. So shameless plug for Unafraid with Eddie Penny. But that got me back on the book writing horse, and then I've got several now in various stages of completion with folks, and I've done everything from just helping folks out, read it and give my opinion, to tweaks, to full on sort of ghosting the whole thing, and all the above. So it's been fun. I like writing books. I don't like selling books, so you really won't see my name attached to a lot of them. And I'm not out there doing the marketing stuff, which is right where I want to be. So,
yep.
Yeah, but it's been fun, and
Awesome.
It's been, just a great opportunity.
Well, I'll tell you what, this interview's been fun. Keith, I appreciate your time. We're going to wrap it up here. If you want to see more Keith Wood, be sure you pick up a copy of Guns and Ammo magazine. All you got to do is open up that back page to read Spent Cases, the name of his column, every month. And we're going to get a little bit of guns you buy at auction, a little bit of insight on those. Your guns have a story for certain, as well as political insight and the news and happening around the industry. So, Keith, I appreciate you taking the time to share a little bit of your personal story with the audience, and look forward to doing it again. And also, you're going to want to stick to the Guns and Ammo the Buzz podcast, because you'll even see Keith Wood hosting a few of his own episodes. So we appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks a lot. And I look forward to doing those. And I think there's some stories out there that need to be preserved and told. And I'm going to do my best to make sure that happens.
Go find them.
All right.